All right, design basics. We're going to jump into the software now, and we're going to take a look quite a few areas. We're going to look at some default options that you have available to you that can be pulled in on all your designs. Then we're going to go in, we're going to actually use the setup on page 6. We're going to actually create that report. We're going to talk about the header and the footer. We're going to add fields into the body of the report. We're actually going to do a whole bunch of stuff in there so that you can see how to get the information onto or into the body, and then how you can manipulate it. We're going to look at selecting the processing record and modifying the sort order if we need. We're going to look at some display options. We're going to look at these briefly. We're going to go into more detail next week in the advanced session. Okay, so let me jump out here. And let's go back into report design. All right, so we're on page 7 now in your handout. And what we're looking at here is under, firstly under Tools, Customize. We're going to look at these two areas here first, and we're going to look at the extra tabs that there are when you're inside RD. Now, if you're outside of Report Designer, you just have this row of tabs: General, Status, Toolbar, Remote Print, and Appearance. What we're going to talk about are the tabs back here, starting with Preferences. Okay, and that's at the bottom of page 7. So here is your page heading option. So always use auto page heading means that it's always going to pull in a heading at the top. Your other choices are to prompt for one or to never use one. I don't think I've ever talked to anyone that uses either of these. Leave this at always use. We can make some modifications to the heading as we need. Your column headings, initial caps for the text. You can change that to all caps or even turn off the headings. Your default negative format, it defaults to put the minus sign on the end. If you're doing some designs and you're interfacing to Excel, you're going to want to change this to put the minus sign in the front. And you can do this on a report by report basis. So this is just setting up the default that's going to happen when we create our designs. Once we have the design created, we can actually make changes to any of these areas with it specific to that report design. So the checkboxes below, you can ask, or it defaults to give you a warning when you delete a column. So we're going to leave that on. So if I delete a field or a column out of a report, it's going to ask me, are you sure that's what you want to do? And I can say yes. If you want it to prompt you to enter design notes, you can put a check mark here, or give a warning if you change a font. And then this one, Field List Expands Design Window. That means when you go back in and open up an existing design, the field list for the driving record will automatically come up on the screen. Now we can turn that on, so you may want to leave that off for now. And if you decide later you want it to automatically pop in there, you can come in here and check this list or check this field. Okay. Now the descriptions of those are on the top of page 8. Colors tab here. You can set foreground and background colors, but you need to be aware. See the note at the bottom of page 8. This is only for display in Report Designer. This has nothing to do with how this is going to print. And we're going to be looking at that as far as printing, it's in a different area within the report design. So this colors area is just for the display inside RD. Okay. Most people do not change that. All right, totals is on page 9. So this is the default. You're going to get a single asterisk next to a total line. It defaults to drop the total if only one group prints, which means if I've only got one invoice for a vendor and I've told it to subtotal by vendor, and there's only one, it's not going to repeat that same amount for me twice. It's going to drop that total because there's only one record that prints. When the total prints include higher totals, which means it's going to subtotal down the page. So all the totals it's from the top down. Okay. Then you also have an option here to put your grand totals or report totals on a new page. So if you want it to roll up and print those totals separately, you can. The spacing is going to default to double. So we're going to leave that. We can control spacing on a report by report basis. The automatically create totals, I would leave that unchecked. We have an area that we're going to define what totals we want. If you check this box, it will automatically create total lines on your report, and that might be confusing. So I would leave this unchecked, and then we're going to assign totals within the design itself. Page heading is on page 10. So the default here is to print company name, page number, and record security. I would uncheck that. I'm going to uncheck it for myself. This is a line that won't mean anything to anybody. It can be confusing, and you usually turn it off anyway when you set the total. Or excuse me, when you set the title of the report. If you want to see the design name print up in the heading, you can check that. So if people want to know, well, what report design was used to create this, if you check that, it'll pull that at the top of the report. The output file name, if you want to have it put the name of the PDF file or the print file, you can include that up in the heading, as well as the operator, the report date, and the system date. And then here over on the other side, this is where you can define the format for those two dates. And it defaults to month, day, year with dashes. The view, the default is normal, which means it's going to be a white screen like you see right here, and then the fields are going to show up in black. So that's what's considered normal. You'll see the fields going across the screen, black and white. There are 3 other views that we're going to be talking about when we get into setting up the design. One is called print controls, and it determines, what print controls determines is how often a value is going to print when you run the report. It will change the color of the fields on the screen depending on what you select as far as a print control. The suppressed areas, we can block areas out where if there's no value, it will suppress the blank space that it would have normally left when you run the report. The conditional print area, again, this will change the fields into different colors if you're using it. This is where you can assign conditional formulas to a specific field on the report. That's different than assigning a condition to the overall report. So there may be situations where you need to say only print in this field if a certain criteria is met. And then you have an option to check a box to leave it blank if there's nothing there, or suppress the space if it doesn't meet the condition. All 3 of these, we're going to get into a lot more discussion next week. And so I'm hoping we'll look at these a little bit today, but they'll make more sense as we do a more advanced session. Now, initially open windows, we're telling it here that we want the header to show, and we might want a footer to show, and we might want the field list to open up again when we initially go into the report design. And we can modify this as we go into each design. So these are just generic defaults again that will happen when we create a brand new report. After the report or the design is started, we can go into these different areas within the design, and we can override the defaults if we need to.